My name is Victoria, and at 32 years old, I never expected my family to stab me in the back on Christmas night. I figured they'd finally see my worth when I came back broken from a deployment accident. Instead, over that holiday dinner, my mom locked eyes with me and snapped, "Get out of my house, you useless one." My sister didn't hesitate, she shoved me hard toward the door. I stumbled on the icy steps, the fall snapping my arm like dry wood. Pain exploded through me, but no one moved. Not her, not my brother, not a soul. They just watched as I lay there, the front door slamming shut behind them. With my arm throbbing and no options left, I dragged myself to the bus station in the freezing dark, heading to my grandma's horse ranch in rural Montana. Those 5 cold words did not make me fall, but lit a fire in me. From now on, those who sowed betrayal will taste the consequences they never expected. 6 months later, my phone rang. Mom's trembling voice echoed in the night. "Save your sister's company." I clenched the phone tightly, the corners of my lips curling up. This time my answer would make them never forget. As I unpack this path from raw betrayal to cold payback, drop your location in the comments and subscribe if tales of family knives in the back and rising stronger hit close to home. Growing up under Susan's roof set the tone for everything. My mother. Susan made sure her love came with strings attached. "I bought you that backpack, so you better ace your tests this quarter," she'd say. Or, "After all, I've sacrificed, the least you can do is scrub the kitchen spotless." Nothing was free. It was always a bargain. My father left when I was 6. I have faint recollections of a man with a calm demeanor who played games with me before bed, but those blurred over time. After he departed, Susan often highlighted how I mirrored him in bad ways. "You have his weak posture," she'd scoff, always slouching through life. The only steady comfort came from my grandmother, Margaret, Susan's mother. Her horse ranch in rural Montana was my escape, a place where I could unwind without conditions. During summer visits, I'd assist with the horses, learn to prepare fruit preserves, and listen on the porch as she recounted her experiences. "Victoria," she'd say, as we groomed the stalls, "you have a resilience that challenges can't crush. Keep that when times turn tough." I held on to those phrases through school as Susan's attitudes grew more unpredictable. Some days she'd seem affectionate, picking up my preferred treats or inquiring about my classes. Those rare moments fueled my hope that she'd eventually offer love without strings. My siblings mastered her system better than I did. Michael, 2 years younger, turned into a shapeshifter, molding himself to whatever suited Susan at the time. Amber, 4 years my junior, honed flattery from young. "Susan, you look so young," she'd comment, and Susan would light up. Meanwhile, I stayed the defiant one, the problematic one, the one who questioned too much and required too much. By 18, I knew escape was essential. The army appeared ideal, a path out, a chance to contribute to something bigger, and oddly, a method to gain Susan's respect at last. The day I announced my enlistment, I spotted a rare glint in her eyes, approval. "The service will straighten you out," she remarked. "Instill some order." What she omitted, but what emerged soon after, was that my commitment also opened financial doors for her. As I geared up for basic training, she mentioned casually how finances were tight, how raising 3 kids alone was tough, how the roof leaked. I pledged my first allotment to send money home right from the recruiter's desk. The officer had just outlined my pay scale when I mentally earmarked a chunk for Susan and the others. It felt right. Family backs family after all. Basic training was grueling but straightforward. For once, the guidelines were logical. Push hard, obey commands, aid your squad, and advance. Susan's random standards gave way to the clear directives of my instructors. I excelled there, finishing near the top. In my initial deployment, I arranged an automatic transfer of $500 monthly. It cut deep into my earnings, but base life covered most costs. On sparse calls home, Susan sounded pleased to hear me. "The community admires your uniform," she once shared. "I parade your pictures. My daughter defending the nation. Those comments carried me through isolated nights abroad through uncertainty and isolation. Susan was proud. I'd finally achieved something correct. As time rolled on, her demands escalated. The roof became a garage overhaul. Then Amber needed tuition help. Then Michael faced a layoff and returned home. Each instance I upped the amount, often grabbing extra duties or risky posts with bonus pay. When I got leave to visit the phone, warmth seldom showed in person. Susan had repair lists ready or commitments that kept her occupied. Yet there were flickers of cake, with my liked topping a collection of articles on military feats, possibly involving my group, a brief embrace as I left for the airport. I treasured those like rarities, proof that deep down Susan cared. I just had to strive more, provide more, improve. Margaret saw the pattern clearly. On my prioritized ranch trips, despite Susan's gripes, she'd try to illuminate gently. Victoria, affection shouldn't demand so much effort, she'd note as we walked the pastures. You can't purchase genuine care, and if you could, it wouldn't hold value. But I wasn't prepared to absorb her insight. The cycle was locked. I'd serve. I'd transfer funds. And one day it would suffice. One day I'd return to the accepting family I'd craved. That vision propelled me through a decade of duty, through multiple tours, through losing comrades and their memorials. Throughout, I clung to serving not only the country but earning my spot in their affections. How mistaken I was. Those first months in the Army reshaped me. The rigid structure replaced Susan's erratic demands with clear purpose. I threw myself into training, waking before dawn, running drills until my muscles burned, and studying tactics late into the night. My instructors noticed, and I graduated among the best in my class. Deployments followed, harsh, dusty outposts where I learned to trust my unit like family. I set up a monthly transfer of $500 home, a chunk of my paycheck that felt like a lifeline to Susan, Michael, and Amber. Living on base kept my costs low, so I justified the sacrifice. Family supports family, I told myself. Susan's calls were rare but warm when the money hit her account. Your service makes us proud, she'd say, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. I'm showing everyone your photos in uniform. Those words kept me going through long shifts and sleepless nights, convincing me I was earning her respect. But the requests grew. 500 became 600 when Susan said the car needed repairs, then 700 for Amber's college books. When Michael lost his job, it hit 800, forcing me to take extra patrols with hazard pay. I didn't question it. Each transfer felt like a step toward the love I'd chased since childhood. On leave, Susan's warmth faded in person. She'd hand me lists of chores or stay busy with social events. Still small gestures, a favorite pie, a quick nod kept my hope alive. I just needed to give more. Margaret saw through it during my ranch visits. You're buying affection, Victoria, she warned as we mended fences under Montana's wide sky. It's not real if it comes with a price. I brushed it off, too stubborn to listen. Patricia, a fellow soldier I'd grown close to, echoed her on a call from base. You're giving too much, she said. They're using you. But I clung to my dream of a family that cared. My unit became my true home, comrades who shared meals, fears, and victories. We celebrated promotions together, mourned losses together. That bond carried me through years of service, through sandstorms and gunfire, believing I was building something back home too. Susan's letters grew shorter, her calls less frequent, but I kept sending money, certain it would bridge the gap. Each deployment I pushed harder, took riskier assignments, thinking one more check would make me enough. It was a lie I told myself to survive the loneliness. The truth was waiting to break me. My final deployment was meant to be routine. Our unit escorted supply trucks through a quiet zone, a route I'd run dozens of times. I was joking with a new recruit about staying alert when the truck ahead swerved to avoid debris. The jolt came fast, metal crunched, and I was thrown forward. I woke in a field hospital, my right leg screaming with nerve pain, my femur fractured. The doctor's words were blunt. I'd survive, but my military career was done. Months of surgeries and therapy followed, teaching me to walk with a cane while painkillers barely dulled the ache. The worst was losing my purpose, my unit, my sense of belonging. Susan called more than ever during those hospital days. Her voice, softer than I'd known, promised comfort. "We're fixing up your old room," she said once. "You'll have space to recover." "The church group's planning meals for our wounded hero," she added later. I clung to those assurances, picturing a homecoming where I'd finally feel wanted, a family dinner with me at the center, Susan helping with my exercises, a real bond at last. That hope carried me through the grueling trip home. The military arranged transport to the airport, but from there I was on my own. Each step with my cane shot pain through my leg, and navigating crowded holiday terminals drained me. As my plane descended into Montana's snowy landscape, I felt a flicker of belonging. I was returning not just to a country but to a family, or so I believed. When I landed, my phone showed no messages, no missed calls checking on me. I dialed Susan. "Just got in," I said. Her response was flat. "Oh, today, we're swamped with Christmas prep. Can you grab a cab?" The ride to our suburban house cost nearly $80 a sting, with my funds running low. The place was decked out, twinkling lights, a giant wreath, a glowing reindeer display Susan loved showing off to neighbors. I struggled up the icy path with my duffel leaning hard on my cane, sweat soaking my coat despite the chill. No one came out to help. At the door, I hesitated, unsure if I should knock or enter. Susan opened it before I decided, her face more irritated than welcoming. "You're letting the cold in," she snapped, turning away. The house smelled of holiday spices, but the warmth I'd imagined was gone. "You can use your old room," she said without looking back. "It's a storage space now, but Michael set up an air mattress." I limped upstairs, each step a jolt of pain. The room was unrecognizable: boxes, old furniture, no trace of my childhood. A half-inflated air mattress sagged in the corner with a thin blanket tossed on it. No photos, no memories, just clutter. I sat on the mattress, its creak echoing my sinking heart. 10 years of service, thousands sent home, and this was my return. I pushed down the hurt, telling myself they'd warm up once the holiday rush settled. But deep down, I felt the truth creeping in. This wasn't the home I'd dreamed of. By evening, the house buzzed with relatives for Christmas dinner. Aunts, uncles, cousins filled the rooms, their chatter loud with updates on jobs and holiday plans. I sat quietly in a corner, my leg throbbing, making it hard to keep up with their quick exchanges. My cane leaned against the chair, drawing awkward glances but few words. I felt like a ghost, my presence barely acknowledged. Susan called everyone to the dining room, where a polished table gleamed with her best china and a centerpiece of sparkling ornaments. She pointed me to a cramped seat at the end, tucked against the wall. "Your cane won't trip anyone there," she said sharply, her tone slicing through me. I maneuvered into the chair, my legs stiff, every move watched by relatives who quickly looked away. Dinner began with a brief prayer, no mention of my service or sacrifice. Talk swirled around promotions and new cars, Susan beaming as cousins shared their wins. I tried to join in. "My unit rebuilt a clinic last tour I started, but Michael cut me off." "Pass the potatoes," he said, eyes fixed on his plate. Each attempt to speak was drowned out or ignored, Susan steering the conversation elsewhere with pointed questions. The tension built until dessert, when a sharp spasm shot through my leg. I flinched, knocking over a glass of water. Susan's face hardened. "You can't even sit through a meal," she spat. "You're useless, a burden dragging us down. Get out of my house." The room went silent. Before I could respond, Amber stood, her expression cold. She grabbed my arm and shoved me toward the door. I stumbled on the icy steps outside, falling hard. My right arm snapped under me, pain blazing through. I looked back, expecting someone to help. No one moved. Michael stared at his plate. Susan turned away, and the door slammed shut. The cold bit my skin as I lay there, arm useless, leg screaming. I forced myself up, gripping my cane, and limped to the street. No hotel was near, and my bank balance was under $200 after the cab. A passing driver slowed, an older man with kind eyes. "You okay, miss?" he asked. "I need the bus station," I managed, voice shaky. He drove me there, sharing stories of his own holiday alone, refusing my offer to pay. At the station, a late-night bus was leaving for a town near Margaret's ranch. A clerk, seeing my struggle, helped me board. As the bus rolled through the snowy night, I stared out the window, my arm cradled pain mixing with betrayal. My unit had been my real family, sharing meals, covering each other in danger. We'd mourned losses together, celebrated small victories. Susan, Michael, Amber, they'd taken my money for years but offered nothing when I needed them most. Their rejection stung worse than the fall. The army had taught me strength, but this night tested it. I wasn't sure what waited at Margaret's, but I had nowhere else to turn. The bus dropped me at a small Montana station just before midnight. My arm throbbed in a makeshift sling, my leg burned with every step, and my duffel dragged behind me. The 5-mile trek to Margaret's horse ranch was impossible in my state. A station worker, noticing my struggle, called a local driver, Harold, who was heading that way. He helped me into his truck, asking about my service with quiet respect, unlike the family I'd left behind. His headlights lit the gravel road to the ranch where a single kitchen light glowed. I thanked him, insisting I'd be fine, though doubt gnawed at me. The porch steps felt like a cliff. Sweat stung my eyes as I leaned on my cane, pain pulsing. I knocked the sound sharp in the still night. No answer. Panic rose. Maybe Margaret was away. Maybe she'd reject me too. I knocked harder. Footsteps shuffled inside and the door cracked open. Margaret stood there, silver hair loose, her face stern under reading glasses. "Go away," she said, voice like ice. "Your mother called, you've caused enough trouble." My heart shattered worse than the fall. I swayed, tears blurring my vision. Then her expression shifted, shock, then fierce warmth. "Victoria, oh God, I'm sorry." She gasped, grabbing my arms before I collapsed. "It was a test, I had to see you myself. Susan lied, said you'd gone violent, stolen from her." She pulled me into a tight embrace, mindful of my injuries, and helped me inside. On her worn couch, I spilled everything: the dinner, Susan's cruel words, Amber's shove the fall, Michael's silence. Margaret's face darkened with anger. "My own daughter," she muttered. "I've never been so ashamed." She handed me water and pain pills, reading my tension. "Let's get you to bed," she said. "We'll sort this tomorrow." Her guest room felt like a sanctuary, photos of me in uniform on the dresser, a quilt in my favorite colors. Unlike Susan's storage dump, this space held proof I belonged. Margaret stayed close, humming a familiar tune from childhood as I drifted off. The next weeks at the ranch began my healing. Margaret drove me to a local doctor, an older man who adjusted my therapy plan. The arm cast came off in 6 weeks, but my leg needed longer, with nerve pain lingering. I leaned on Margaret's strength. Her community stepping up. Neighbors cleared paths for my cane, church friends dropped off meals. Patricia called often, sharing her own recovery from a similar betrayal. "They don't deserve you," she said on a video chat, her voice steady. "Focus on who lifts you up." Margaret uncovered Susan's deception when we checked my old bank statements. The thousands I'd sent meant for repairs, or Amber's tuition funded Susan's lavish trips and new furniture. None went to the house or family needs. The betrayal cut deep, but Margaret's rage matched mine. "She should have protected you," she said, sorting papers at her kitchen table. I threw myself into ranch work to cope. I couldn't ride horses yet, but I learned to manage feed schedules and update Margaret's old ledgers. Caring for the animals gave me purpose, their trust a quiet comfort. Patricia's calls kept me grounded, her stories of rebuilding after family rejection mirroring my own. Slowly, I felt my strength return, not just in my body but in my sense of self. Margaret's unwavering support showed me what family could be, and I began to see a future beyond the pain Susan and the others had caused. 6 months after that brutal Christmas night, I'd built a new rhythm at Margaret's horse ranch. My phone rang one afternoon while I was updating the stable records. Susan's name flashed on the screen, the first contact since she'd thrown me out. I hesitated, my healed arm tensing, but answered. Her voice was strained, not with regret, but with need. Amber's company is failing, she said quickly. She mismanaged funds and creditors are circling. You've got your veteran benefits, help her out. It's family. I stared at the Montana horizon, the words, useless one, and Amber's shove echoing in my mind. I don't have a sister, I said coldly, and hung up. That was it. No second chances, no explanations. I'd given them a decade of my earnings, my health, my hope. They'd given me nothing but a slammed door and a broken arm. I was done. Susan's world unraveled soon after. Neighbors later told Margaret that Susan's spending lavish vacations, new cars, all funded by my transfers, caught up with her. Without my money, her debts piled high. The bank foreclosed on her house, forcing her into a cramped rental across town. Amber's startup, propped up by my cash, collapsed under her reckless decisions. She lost everything, filed for unemployment benefits, and took a low-wage job to scrape by. Michael, who'd leaned on Susan's handouts, drowned in credit card debt. His credit score tanked, locking him out of loans or decent housing. Their downfall wasn't my doing. It was the natural consequence of their greed and betrayal, a reality all too common in families stretched thin by lies. At the ranch, I found my footing. Margaret taught me to manage the horse business, from breeding schedules to market sales. My legs still ached on cold days, but therapy and ranch work strengthened me. Patricia stayed close, her calls a lifeline. She'd faced her own family's rejection and built anew, urging me to do the same. You're worth more than their demands, she said during one late-night chat. Choose people who see that. Margaret and Patricia became my true family, not bound by blood but by unwavering support. I enrolled in online agriculture courses, using my military benefits to plan a future in ranching. The horses, with their quiet trust, grounded me in ways Susan never could. One evening, as Margaret and I watched the sunset over the snowy fields, I reflected on the past year. I'd come to her broken, believing I needed Susan's approval to be whole. Now I stood taller, not just despite my cane, but because of it. I'd learned family isn't defined by who shares your name, but by who lifts you when you're down. Susan, Amber, and Michael had taken my sacrifices and thrown them back in my face. Cutting them off wasn't revenge, it was self-respect. I'd spent years chasing their love, but real love doesn't demand payment. It builds you up, like Margaret's steady presence or Patricia's honest words. That lesson, forged through pain and clarity, was my greatest gain. If you've ever cut ties to find your strength, share your story below. It might help someone else see they're enough.
I'm leaving you, and I've already sold the house to move in with my new girl. Good luck finding a place. Alan chuckled through the phone before hanging up. I sat there in the conference room of Gravenhall Group, looking at my client across the mahogany table, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not heartbreak, relief. My name is Natalie Pierce. I'm 43 years old, and I'm a commercial real estate broker here in Jersey City, New Jersey. For the past 18 years, I've been married to a man who thought my success was his personal ATM. What I wanted was simple: respect, partnership, and basic human decency. What stood in my way was a husband who saw my achievements as opportunities for his next get-rich-quick scheme. The injustice I faced was watching someone I loved systematically try to destroy everything I'd built with my own hands. I turned to my client, Mr. Harrison from Iron Veil Robotics, and smiled. I'm sorry about that interruption. Where were we with the warehouse specifications? But even as I discussed square footage and loading docks, my mind was calculating. Alan had always been careless with details, especially legal ones. 3 major financial disasters in our marriage had taught me to protect myself. The gambling debts when I was 35, the failed restaurant investment 2 years later, then last year's cryptocurrency nightmare that nearly bankrupted us. After that third mess, I'd quietly done something Alan never knew about. I'd refinanced our house through my business LLC and transferred ownership to Gravenhall Group Properties, my company. The mortgage payments came from my business account. The deed was in my company's name, legally, permanently, and completely. I finished the contract review, shook hands with Mr. Harrison, and walked to my car with measured steps. The September afternoon was crisp, and as I drove through the familiar streets toward home, I thought about the backup documents in my office safe. I thought about the cease and desist letters my attorney had prepared months ago, just in case. Most of all, I thought about Alan's smug voice and how it would sound when reality hit him. My phone buzzed with a text from his number. "Don't bother coming home. We're already moving in. My lawyer says you can't do anything about it." I actually laughed out loud. Alan's lawyer, if he even had one, clearly hadn't done his homework. Neither had Alan. In 18 years of marriage, he'd never once looked at our financial documents, never questioned how the bills got paid, never wondered why I'd been so insistent about handling all the paperwork after his last disaster. As I pulled into my driveway, I could see lights on inside and unfamiliar boxes stacked by the front door. This was going to be even easier than I'd imagined. I'd always been the responsible one in our marriage. While Alan dreamed big and schemed bigger, I built a real estate empire one commission at a time. My company, Gravenhall Group Properties, started in a tiny office above a sandwich shop 15 years ago. Now we handled commercial properties throughout northern New Jersey, and my personal portfolio was worth more than Alan had ever bothered to calculate. Growing up in Newark, I'd learned early that security came from your own efforts, not from depending on others. My mother had lost everything when my father left, and I swore I'd never be that vulnerable. That's why I'd always kept separate business accounts, why I'd insisted on maintaining my maiden name professionally, and why I'd quietly restructured our assets after Alan's financial disasters. Alan saw my success differently. To him, my achievements were validation of his own importance. After all, he was married to a successful businesswoman. He loved telling people at parties about our real estate company, about our investments, about our financial success. He never mentioned that he hadn't contributed a meaningful dollar to any of it in years. The warning signs had been there for months. Late nights when he claimed to be working on his latest business venture. Phone calls he took in the garage. New clothes I'd never seen him buy. But the real tell was how he'd started questioning our financial arrangements, asking about property values and mortgage details with a casual air that wasn't casual at all. 2 weeks ago, I'd caught him photographing documents in my home office. When I confronted him, he'd laughed it off, claiming he was just trying to understand our finances better. I'd pretended to believe him while quietly moving all important paperwork to my business office and setting up additional security measures. Now, sitting in my car looking at my own house, I understood what he'd been planning. In his mind, he'd found the perfect exit strategy: sell the house, pocket the proceeds, and disappear with his new girlfriend before I could stop him. It was actually clever, in a completely illegal and morally bankrupt way. I pulled out my phone and called my attorney, Vincent Rodriguez. "Vincent, it's Natalie. Remember those contingency documents we prepared? I need them tonight." "The cease and desist papers? What happened?" "Alan tried to sell my house to fund his escape plan. Can you meet me at the office in an hour?" "Already sold? Natalie, that's fraud." "Yes, I know. 1 hour, Vincent. Bring everything." I hung up and sat for a moment, watching shadows move behind my living room curtains. Alan was in there celebrating his cleverness with whatever woman had helped him plan this betrayal. They had no idea what was coming. The pieces fell together like a brutal puzzle as I recalled the past few months. Alan's secretive behavior hadn't just been about an affair. It had been about orchestrating my complete financial ruin. He'd been methodically gathering information, photographing documents, and clearly consulting with someone who'd convinced him he could steal my life's work. The moment that changed everything had happened 3 weeks ago during dinner. Alan had casually mentioned that property values in our neighborhood were probably at their peak, and wondered aloud if we should consider our options. I'd dismissed it as idle conversation, but now I realized he'd been testing the waters, seeing if I'd give him any information he could use. Then last week, I'd come home early from a client meeting to find him in my office, hunched over my computer. The screen went black the moment I walked in, and Alan had jumped up with that guilty smile I'd learned to recognize over the years. "Just checking email," he'd said, but my computer required a password he didn't know. Unless someone had helped him crack it. Unless someone with more technical skills had been coaching him through this entire scheme. The real shock had come this morning when I'd reviewed my business accounts and noticed some unusual activity. Someone had attempted to access our joint checking account multiple times over the past week. The attempts had failed because I'd changed all the passwords after catching Alan at my computer, but the pattern was clear. He'd been trying to drain our accounts before disappearing. Now, watching my house filled with boxes and celebrating thieves, I felt that familiar cold clarity that had gotten me through every crisis in my business. Alan wasn't just leaving me. He was trying to destroy me. The house sale wasn't about starting fresh with his new girlfriend. It was about making sure I had nothing left to restart with. But Alan had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed I was the same trusting woman I'd been 18 years ago, someone who'd let him handle important decisions while I focused on building my career. He'd never bothered to learn how my business actually worked, never paid attention to the legal structures I'd created to protect myself after his previous failures. The house he'd just sold belonged to Gravenhall Group Properties, LLC. Not to Alan Pierce, not to Natalie Pierce, to my business entity, which he had no legal connection to whatsoever. The mortgage was in my company's name, the deed was recorded under my LLC, and every payment for the past 2 years had come from my business accounts. I'd essentially bought my own house back from myself after his cryptocurrency disaster, ensuring he could never again gamble away our shelter. It had been a precaution I'd hoped never to need. But as I sat in my driveway, listening to laughter and celebration drifting from my windows, I realized this precaution was about to become my weapon. Alan had tried to sell something that wasn't his to someone who was about to learn an expensive lesson about due diligence. Time to go inside and educate them both. I took a deep breath and walked up to my own front door, keys ready. The sound of voices inside grew clearer, Alan's familiar laugh mixing with a woman's higher-pitched giggling. They were discussing paint colors. "I think we should go with something warmer in the bedroom," the woman was saying. "This beige is so dated." "Whatever you want, Jessica," Alan replied. "It's our house now. We can do anything we want with it." I slid my key into the lock and stepped inside. The living room was chaos, boxes everywhere, my personal belongings shoved carelessly into corners, and 2 people who froze the moment they saw me. Alan recovered first. "Natalie, you're not supposed to be here. I told you." "You told me you sold the house," I interrupted, setting my purse down on the entrance table that was apparently now covered with someone else's mail. "I'm curious, who exactly did you sell it to?" The woman, Jessica, was younger than I'd expected. Maybe early 30s, with the kind of confidence that comes from believing you've won something important. She stepped forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Jessica, Alan's fiancée. We understand this is awkward, but the house belongs to us now. I'm sure you can find somewhere else to stay tonight." I studied them both, noting how Alan's hands shook slightly as he lit a cigarette. He only smoked when he was nervous. "Fiancé? That's interesting. When exactly did you 2 get engaged?" 3 months ago, Jessica said proudly, showing off a ring I'd never seen before. Right after Alan explained how his wife was holding him back financially. The audacity was breathtaking. 3 months ago, Alan had been begging me to help him out of another investment disaster, swearing he'd learned his lesson about risky ventures. Apparently his new venture had been planning to steal my house. And the sale, I continued calmly. When did that happen? Alan finally found his voice. Yesterday. The papers are signed, the money's transferred. It's done, Natalie. You need to accept that and move on. I walked over to the kitchen counter where he'd spread out some official-looking documents. Real estate purchase agreements, transfer forms, even what looked like a deed. Someone had put significant effort into creating this fiction. These are impressive, I said, flipping through the pages. Very professional looking. Who's the buyer listed here? Sunset Properties, Jessica answered quickly. We found them through a real estate investor Alan knows. They paid cash. Above market value, actually. The lies were getting more elaborate by the minute. I pulled out my phone and called Vincent Rodriguez while they watched. Vincent, I'm at the house now. Yes, they're here. Can you conference in the title company? I need them to confirm ownership records for this address. Alan stepped forward, trying to grab my phone. You can't do this. The sale is final. The sale of what? I asked, dodging his reach. Vincent, yes, I'll hold. Jessica was looking less confident now. Alan, what is she doing? You said she couldn't stop us. She can't, Alan insisted, but his voice had lost its earlier bravado. The paperwork is all legal. Oh, the paperwork might be legal, I agreed. The problem is you can't sell something you don't own. I put my phone on speaker as Vincent's voice filled the room. Natalie, I have the title company on the line. They've confirmed that this property is owned by Gravenhall Group Properties, LLC. Has been for the past 2 years. No transfers, no liens, no pending sales. The silence that followed was beautiful. Jessica's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, realization, then growing fury. Alan, what the hell is he talking about? You said you owned this house. I do own it, Alan snapped, but his voice cracked. We're married. What's hers is mine. Actually, I said, still holding my phone on speaker. Vincent, would you mind explaining community property law as it applies to business entities? Vincent's voice was professionally neutral, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath. In New Jersey, assets held by a limited liability company are separate from personal marital property, even if one spouse owns the company. If Gravenhall Group Properties owns this house, then Mr. Pierce has no legal claim to it whatsoever. Alan's face was shifting from confusion to panic. That's impossible. I live here. I pay for things here. When was the last time you actually paid for anything here? I asked. The mortgage comes from my business account. Utilities, insurance, property taxes, all business expenses. You haven't contributed to this household in over 3 years. Jessica rounded on Alan. You told me this was your house. You said your wife was just being vindictive about the divorce. Divorce? I raised an eyebrow. Alan, did you forget to mention that we're not actually getting divorced? You never filed papers, never served me with anything. You just decided to sell my house and disappear. The color drained from Alan's face as the magnitude of his situation hit him. He hadn't just attempted to commit adultery, he'd committed fraud. Real estate fraud. The kind that involved prison time. Vincent's voice cut through the tension. Natalie, I've also pulled the records on this supposed sale to Sunset Properties. There's no such entity registered in New Jersey. The tax identification number on these documents belongs to a landscaping company in Pennsylvania that's been defunct for 5 years. Jessica stared at the papers scattered across my counter. These are fake? All of this is fake? Fake documents, fake company, fake sale, I confirmed. The only real thing here is the crime Alan just committed by forging my signature on legal documents. Alan finally seemed to grasp the seriousness of his situation. Natalie, wait. We can work this out. I made a mistake. You made several mistakes, I corrected. You committed fraud. You forged my signature. You attempted to steal property worth over $500,000, and you did it all while lying to both me and her about your intentions. Jessica was backing toward the door. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. I didn't know, she said quickly. He told me he owned this place. I thought it was all legal. Did you put any money into this supposed purchase? I asked. Her silence was answer enough. She'd invested in this fantasy, probably contributed to what she thought was a down payment or closing costs. Money that had likely gone straight into Alan's pocket. I looked at both of them, my soon-to-be ex-husband and his accomplice in grand theft. Here's what's going to happen. You're both going to leave my house immediately. You're going to take your boxes, your lies, and your fake engagement ring with you. Where are we supposed to go? Jessica demanded. That's not my problem anymore, I replied. But I suggest you figure it out quickly, because in about an hour, I'm filing a police report for fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. How long that gives you to disappear depends on how fast you can pack. Alan opened his mouth to argue, but Vincent's voice stopped him. Mr. Pierce, I strongly recommend you consult with a criminal defense attorney. Tonight. The true scope of their situation was finally sinking in, and the panic in Alan's eyes told me he was beginning to understand just how thoroughly he'd destroyed his own life. Alan's desperation kicked in as the reality of his situation crystallized. Natalie, please, don't do this. We've been married 18 years. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. Fix this? I couldn't help but laugh. Alan, you forged my signature to steal my house. You've been planning this for months. You got engaged to another woman while we were still married. Exactly which part of this do you think can be fixed? Jessica had gone silent, but I could see her mind working. She was calculating her own exposure, wondering if she could be charged as an accomplice. Smart woman. Too bad she'd gotten mixed up with someone as careless as Alan. The documents, Alan said suddenly, lunging toward the counter. If we destroy them, there's no proof. Vincent, I said into my phone, please tell them about the copies. We photographed everything when you called, Vincent's voice confirmed. Plus, the attempted sale was recorded with the county recorder's office this morning. There's a paper trail that can't be erased, Mr. Pierce. Alan slumped against the kitchen island, finally understanding that his scheme hadn't just failed. It had created evidence of his crimes. How did you know? How did you figure it out so fast? I didn't figure it out, Alan. I prevented it. 2 years ago, after your cryptocurrency disaster, I transferred this house to my business. I've been protecting myself from exactly this scenario since your third major financial screw-up. The truth hit him like a physical blow. You've been planning this. You've been waiting for me to... I've been protecting myself from your poor decisions, I corrected. I never imagined you'd actually try to steal from me. I thought even you had limits. Jessica finally spoke up, her voice small. The money I gave you for the down payment. Where is it? Alan's silence answered her question, and her face flushed with anger. You spent it, didn't you? It's gone. I can pay you back, Alan said quickly. Once the dust settles. With what money? Jessica demanded. You don't have a job. You don't own anything. You just committed a felony that's going to follow you for the rest of your life. I watched their partnership dissolve in real time. Jessica grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I'm done. I'm not going to prison because you lied to me about owning a house. Jessica, wait, Alan called after her. We can figure this out. But she was already gone, her footsteps echoing in the driveway as she presumably called someone to pick her up. Within minutes, I heard a car drive away. Alan turned back to me, desperation replacing his earlier arrogance. She's right. I don't have anything left. The money she gave me is gone. I spent it on the engagement ring and deposits for our new apartment. If you press charges, I'll go to prison. That's generally what happens when you commit felonies, I replied calmly. Natalie, I'm begging you, don't destroy my life over this. I looked at my husband of 18 years, this man who just tried to steal everything I'd worked for, and felt nothing but pity. Alan, you destroyed your own life. I'm just refusing to let you destroy mine in the process. Vincent's voice interrupted the moment. Natalie, the police are asking if you want to file charges tonight or wait until morning. I looked around my living room, at the boxes full of belongings that didn't belong here, at the man who'd betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. Tonight, Vincent, I'll be at the station within the hour. Alan's face crumpled as he realized I wasn't going to save him from the consequences of his actions. For the first time in our marriage, he was going to face the full weight of his choices, and I was finally going to be free. I drove to the police station with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. Detective Morrison took my statement while Vincent provided the legal documentation proving my ownership of the house and the fraudulent nature of Alan's attempted sale. "This is pretty straightforward fraud," Detective Morrison said, reviewing the fake documents. "Forged signature, fictitious buyer, attempted theft of property over $500,000. That's a Class B felony." "What kind of sentence does that carry?" I asked. 5 to 10 years, depending on his record and whether he cooperates. I thought about Alan's previous financial disasters, none of which had been criminal, but all of which showed a pattern of poor judgment. He doesn't have a criminal record, but this isn't his first time making catastrophically bad decisions. Vincent handed over a folder thick with documentation. "We've also got evidence of the conspiracy aspect, the fake company registration, the forged identification documents used to create the fraudulent buyer entity. His girlfriend was involved in at least some of the planning. Within 2 hours, I'd filed a comprehensive police report and initiated the process that would likely send my husband to prison. I felt no satisfaction in it, just relief that the threat to my financial security was being neutralized. As I drove home, I passed Alan's car parked at a 24-hour diner near the highway. Through the window, I could see him hunched over a cup of coffee, probably trying to figure out what to do next. His phone was pressed to his ear, likely calling lawyers, family members, anyone who might help him navigate the disaster he'd created. I didn't stop. That part of my life was over. Back at my house, I walked through the rooms, collecting the belongings Alan and Jessica had scattered around. Most of it was worthless: cheap jewelry, outdated electronics, clothes from discount stores. I bagged it all up and set it by the front door. Tomorrow, I'd have the locks changed. Tonight, I'd start planning my new life. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings and paperwork. Alan had indeed hired a criminal defense attorney, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Vincent kept me updated on the case's progress while I focused on rebuilding my life. The strangest part was how quickly I adapted to living alone. 18 years of marriage, and within a week of Alan's arrest, I felt more peaceful than I had in years. No more wondering where money was disappearing to. No more unexpected financial crises. No more walking on eggshells around someone whose next scheme might destroy everything I'd built. My business thrived without the distraction of Alan's chaos. I closed 3 major deals in the month following his arrest, including a warehouse complex that netted me a 6-figure commission. For the first time in years, I could focus entirely on my work without worrying about what disaster Alan might create while I was in meetings. Jessica, it turned out, had cooperated fully with the police investigation in exchange for immunity from prosecution. She'd provided evidence of Alan's planning process, including text messages where he'd bragged about finally getting what he deserved from our marriage. Her cooperation sealed his fate. The divorce proceedings were remarkably simple. Alan had no assets to claim, no legitimate grievances to air, and a pending felony conviction that made him eager to avoid additional legal scrutiny. I kept the house, the business, and my retirement accounts. He kept his freedom until sentencing, which wasn't scheduled for another 2 months. I celebrated by redecorating the house exactly how I'd always wanted it: clean lines, modern furniture, and absolutely no compromise with someone else's terrible taste. Every room reflected my choices, my preferences, my vision for how a home should feel. For the first time in my adult life, I was living entirely for myself. It was intoxicating. Looking back on those tumultuous weeks, I realized that Alan's betrayal had given me the greatest gift imaginable: complete freedom from his chaos and the chance to build a life based entirely on my own choices and achievements. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply refusing to let someone else's destruction touch your own carefully built world.